good.
How are you doing?
I'm a little bit nervous and a little bit excited and really looking forward to chatting with you. Let's see
Awesome,
what happens.
awesome. So, getting straight into it, tell me about your awakening. How did it all unfold?
I was a child in the garden. The garden was my home. And that was really where I lived. And in the garden, in the back garden, which was it was a big garden. And in that back garden, I was safe to be, and I was connected really with everything. So in the house, I felt like I needed to shrink or freeze, or I didn't even think about it, it just happened. But in the garden and alone in the garden, I was connected with everything. And then I had what I called knowing without knowing. So even when I went back into the house or back into contact with people or in social situations, I took with me this access to the wider information.
Mm. Sounds beautiful. Sounds like the Garden of Eden.
I guess in a certain kind of way it was, because there wasn't a differentiation. There
Mm.
was me and the what was immediately in front of me. And part of that was the imagination of a small child, but not all of it. The
Mm.
other part was whatever it was or is, that connection.
Mm. And was it always like that? Was there something that precipitated that, that caused you to feel that sense of connection to the garden?
So, so in my direct experience, I've always been like that.
Mm.
And but only now, hindsight, in a way, have I unpackaged the story and discovered or realised or worked through that I was born with forceps,
Ah.
which is a very short sentence to say, but it is a big experience for a baby. It is a birth trauma, and I've come to understand that I was shocked out of my body. And I guess that my uh, resource was God. So,
Mm. Wow. So what did that look like for you as a young person? Did you so you you had a sense of access to the garden, but did it mean you weren't the trauma was in the head from being pulled out? So what did that actually feel like for you that you had access to this sort of place, but then you had this trauma around your head? Would that be right?
I think that as a young person, I felt extremely unsafe in the world. As I say, the garden was the place where I
Mm.
could be. It was indeed my Garden of Eden.
Mm.
Um, uh, so I felt very unsafe in myself,
Mm.
both from the trauma and from the point of view that it was obvious to me that the other people I was in contact with were not in contact with the big all in the same way that I was. So I couldn't communicate
Mm.
about that to them. And it felt to me that that portion of my experience was taboo to communicate about, or it was unacceptable, or they didn't recognize it, or they had no idea. So they may well have thought that I was a bit cuckoo. And another piece of that is that because there probably was some perhaps significant damage to my head,
Mm.
the way that I learned to navigate in the world was through my body, is through my body.
Ah.
So,
To carry on, that's beautiful.
so whereas it felt to me that many of the other people were kind of talking and talking
Mm.
in a way that I couldn't really understand or didn't understand, like lots of words that felt disconnected to me. My way of orienting in the world was primarily, and still is, my way of orienting is through my, was and still am constantly in a process of translating from sensations and feelings in my body in a way up into words, or even from gestures in my, that arise in my body. And then I would find a way to put those into words in order to communicate with other people. So my operating system, in a way, was the opposite.
That's extraordinary. That's absolutely extraordinary, because when, a lot of people talking about going through the awakening process that I've interviewed, it's like you say, it's the other way around. They're stripping down all these layers that they've created of separation from what the body's actually got stored in it and what it's feeling and what's happening there. And they're having to literally release all these layers of mental caging and hardening of standpoints, viewpoints, karmic, personal, ancestral ways of looking at the world. And what you're saying is that you were just directly in experience. Did you catch that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I did. I was directly always in a lot of experience. So it was often hugely overwhelming, and I had to find my way to learn to manage such a huge input of data. And there's another thing that I wanted to add, because it's not that I haven't had to do my work. I definitely had to do my personal work. But I think that different people's journeys take different shapes. And some people begin, as it were, in the material and open up to the subtler, more spiritual realms, we could call it. And others, and I think that was probably my experience, began in the mystery. And I've had to work through an awful lot of different stuff, perhaps, or similar stuff to the things that you mentioned, in order to be able to operate in the ordinary world and cope with that connection, as well as being rooted in the everyday,
Beautiful. So these are quite primary experiences that you've talked us through about how you've integrated those as an adult. But give us some context of what happened in your sort of, maybe more mature life, like your, as you were growing up, your teenage or your early adult years, of how this unfolded in terms of this learning curve of how to navigate this sense of being connected to the, a source of consciousness that was God, and yet, correlating that with the birth trauma and maybe this sense of all this wordy, heady way of being that the world is sort of cast in.
I don't know, David, but I can tell you. I mean, I don't know to describe to you really, but I can tell you that I spend a lot of time in great difficulty. I guess some people might call it the dark night of the soul, but I was more than once really lost and broken open, and I've had my time crying by the side of the road, or I don't know, I spent a lot of time by beaches as well. I spent a lot of time sleeping. I went to live abroad. I simply needed the freedom and the space, and there's something about staring at the ocean that was very healing for me, something about sleeping that was very healing. It was a lot to do with having arrive in a way without the the demands of work and socializing, and I was in that world as well. And there were also times when I wasn't, and it was difficult, and I don't think I always knew how difficult it was, because it was the only experience that I had. But from where I am now, which is a quite different place, then
So What were you doing for work in those seminal years?
What was I doing? I was a journalist for a short while. I used internet revolution. I worked for companies making internet marketing in the old days of CD-ROMs, and then I began learning to be a body worker. So my mum, the physiotherapist, I'm going to now go back to a long time ago. So my mum was the physiotherapist working from home. And when I was a little girl, she used to give me, with the permission of her clients, one of their arms or legs to work on.
Wow.
Or to play with. I felt like I was working. She thought that I was playing. But that thread of working with people continued. I'm sorry, I seem to now be answering a slightly different question.
That's great.
So
That's
at school, I was always, enjoy, little massages with people. And as I said, I always had this knowing without knowing, and I always had this way of understanding people. So, I studied and, I worked. And then at a certain point, I found my way back into the healing arts, and I began studying bodywork. And I forgot the beginning of where I was saying that from, but so yeah.
Yeah, how you evolved to integrate your gifts with the challenges that were coming up. So it's really interesting to hear this background of, having this experience with the body and then, being a body worker.
Well, the body has always been my first language, absolutely.
So how was the transition into being a full-time body worker? What did you, was there anything that triggered that, leaving the journalism or the internet work you did behind and moving into doing body work? What happened at that time to help you to make that decision?
I don't think it was sharp. I think that it happened gradually. For a long time, I had another job, an office job, and I would also work with people. And I did many, many trainings, to be honest. And I put myself through many, many sessions and many retreats as a client. So for a while, there's this combination of healing myself, as do many therapists and healers. For a long time, I was myself largely in the process of healing myself, even while working with others. And there's different things that are offered from those different stages. And I can say that I explored different kinds of work. So there was body work, and there was of different kinds. And there was also work with ancestors that I did. I mean, there's a lot of different things that I learned.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the ancestor work. That sounds interesting.
And I often talk, and I often, talk about my formal education, which is the courses that I studied, and my informal education. And by that, I mean, I studied to be a Grimberg method of bodywork practitioner, a craniosacral therapist, a family constellator, and a tantra teacher. Those are all significant several-year trainings that I studied. Alongside that was my time in spiritual school. So I've been a student of in a Gurdjieff group. I'm not even going to remember all of the work that I've done, shamanic work, and a lot of a particular kind of yoga and meditation and inquiry. I mean, I really practically don't remember it all now. There's been a lot of turning the ground over.
So what about the ancestral piece? Could you give us a little bit of insight into how that unravelled and what that was about?
What I can say is it's as if in my personal journey, and maybe it's like that for other people and maybe it's not, it's as if I worked a particular piece at a time until that piece was finished. And it came to a conclusion, and then another piece. I think for many people, it's not just one therapy or approach or practitioner or piece of work. For some people, yes, but for many people, lots of different aspects are required, and they all work on something slightly different.
Because the one enduring thing is your connection to source as the main guidance.
Well, I think, as you know, I don't think about it like that. What is true is that I can say I've always been connected to the mystery. I have tears in my eyes. I don't really know how to put words on it, David, and I'm hesitant about putting words on it because so many of these concepts are taken.
Yes, and misconstrued and have like meaning attached to them. So how would you describe the mystery as you experience it?
I love you asking me that question. So I might describe it as there is so much that is possible in every moment, and there is a wealth of data that's available all of the time, and the value of that is the bringing of real contact between people.
Just say that again. Just say that word again, because it just broke. The internet connection broke. Just say that piece again. Between people.
So the value of it is how much contact is possible between any two people, or a person and an animal, or a person and an object. So my sense and experience is that it is an enriching experience. It doesn't change the fact that you need to pay your bills, and it doesn't change the fact that a person may or may not be your lover or partner, or it doesn't change the fundamentals, but the experience is changed when we can allow that much information, which is always present, when we can tune in. I mean, it's just delicious. It's absolutely delicious. And most people, most of the time, and necessarily so, are rushing. And part of that rushing is because there's things to do. And part of the rush is the culture. And part of the rush is trauma. And so many people are traumatized. But the essence, the core, the loveliness, the deliciousness is always just the immediate moment. And I mean, my mouth is salivating with the deliciousness of it, you know. And that, I think, is the secret that's hidden in plain sight.
So how do you cultivate that? How do you keep that place inside you strong, so that you've overcome your overwhelm that you were talking about earlier, and it's now an anchor of strength in your life, rather than perhaps, as a lot of awakening people experiences, it creates instability, overwhelm, over sensitivity, this juicy sort of salivating place of the mystery, which is what really we're all waking up to ultimately, is this place that is the truth of who we are inside. How do you keep that alive and sort of real, and part, you know, the central theme of of who you are and your work and your life?
Well, it's never, there's not something that I need to do. It's not an effort to
Mm,
keep it alive. It's perhaps the thing I value the most. You could call it a kind of innocence as
mm,
well. So it's always like it's my guide inside, and it's the thing that I've been piloting towards, is to be able to share it with other people. I suppose I have a very clear internal guidance or sense of which piece needs to come next. And I'm very delighted to be writing a book at the moment, which is beginning to, and it's not, to begin to give voice to this way of being that's possible for
mm.
everyone, really.
And how did it emerge through? Did it emerge through like your formative relationships, like romantic, parental? Give me some scoop on how you've kind of galvanized this place through, like you said, through relationship, through other people's presence, family, children. Could you give me some more depth on it?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking me, actually, David.
I'm wanting to find out this place that you work with, about its development, about how you defined it and how you came to make it strong within you. And I'm wondering whether that was made strong through your relationships, through, how, what were the key kind of markers that enabled you to really make this central to who you are and your beingness and your work. There must have been a development path around, areas that were like, oh, if I'm in that type of relationship, it takes me away from that place. If I don't speak my truth, then it gets weaker and I go into chaos. I'm wondering about that process of this delicious place that you described, but how did you create the strength of it and cultivate it, and the challenges that defined you to sort of hold it strong? Did it not work like that?
I got most of that. Um, it's the technical cutting out that meant that I didn't get it the
Yeah, which
first
bit
time
did
round. So
which
my
bit?
heart is shining. No, I think I've got the gist of it.
Yeah.
Thanks. So my heart is shining now, really. And again, it's not that there was a choice, and it's not that I did anything or needed to do anything. It wasn't a consideration. It's been the most, whatever the is, right, has been my most precious possession. And I feel as if I'm slightly repeating myself now, but it's the thing that I've stayed the truest to. So it wasn't a question for me. There wasn't something that I needed to do to cultivate that. My challenge was bringing it into form, being able to cope in a way with that. And obviously, what happens when I come into relationship where that, and it's been secret. It's not something I usually talk about. How do you talk about? What do you say? What on earth would I say to anybody? I mean, I still, when we've been preparing for this interview, I've also, not been sure about certain language, like how do, what to say. When I work with people, then I work from that place. In my work, there is a freedom, because it's in service for that to shine through and to be the pilot. But in ordinary
Mm,
social life, I get stumbled with it. And over time, I've learned to discriminate, and it's as if there's like an artwork going on inside of me
mm,
most of the time. Like there's an awful lot that's going on as to, do I speak, do I not speak, how will it land with somebody, like there's an awful lot of I don't know if my metaphor communicates, but there's an awful lot that goes on in between the translation of how I'm feeling inside and what gets on the outside. So, yeah.
The way I'm experiencing it, sat opposite you, is literally like a melting of all the tense spaces in my body and a softening into myself and a deepening, because it's a bit like you're not losing me in concepts. You're not losing me in the narrative of this interview. You're speaking in such a way where I'm just dropping deeper and deeper into this spaciousness that's in me. And it's like, I think that's why there's sometimes a tussle between us, is because I'm trying to do an interview about concepts and in my head to try and get story. And you're like, but I don't live that way. And this is who I am in every moment. And it's such a beautiful tension for me to do this interview with you, because it just forces me to just get more and more present to the mystery that is in the space between us, is in you, is in me, is in everybody. And it's such a beautiful, it's like it just emerges. It's like it's like literally like a dropping down and a deepening. And we've got a bit fast and talking and chatting, and it's been beautiful to kind of bring the viewers in and those that are watching. But it's like I'm just wondering now if we can expand on this kind of aspects of the work that you do with clients that I'm feeling right now with you. It's just beautiful.
Thank you, David. And I just want to add to what you said, that it's not just in us and between us. I mean, it's around us, and we live within the it, you know. So in lots of ways, I'm so tempted to say, you know, all any of us need to do, and it sounds so cliche. Some of those things sound so cliche. You know, all any of us need to do is to trust and to relax. But of course, it's not that easy. So the way that I work with clients, the word transmission has been used before. And I guess I work to bring people into their truth in the moment, and something shifts in that.
I can feel that happening as you're speaking. Definitely. I can feel that actually happening to my body as we're sharing this space.
So I don't know in advance what's going to happen in a session. I might say that I have no idea what's going to happen. I make it up as I go along, which is the truth, but it's based on my substantial trainings and qualifications, which were not weekends or a couple of hours. Substantial every year trainings and plus, because when I study, I'm comprehensive. Do it to the end. Well, it's important to say that, because it's not just. And so on those bases, those rigorous formal qualifications, I can deeply trust myself that whatever needs to happen, and I've seen it time and time again in sessions, that whatever needs to unfold for people happens. And also in the groups that I hold, it's a slightly different but similar process, also of reconnection. And that's what people report.
So people have referred to it as a transmission. I mean, also, is it like a deconstruction of all the pretenses and all the concepts that people have about themselves and their narrative? Do people find that happens as well? Like it just melts all that so that it's no longer so significant, and people can just drop into the truth of their beingness?
So I hesitate at the word all.
Which word, sorry?
People can let go of. the word all. So I couldn't say they let go of all
No, of
their,
course not. Yeah, yeah. I like to talk in superbly.
but um, piece by piece,
Mm,
what someone's ready for at a particular time. Yes, and I also wanted to say that it's as if there's an alchemy that happens through me. I mean, on, as I say, on the solid, rigorous, professional basis of my trainings, nonetheless, what actually and really happens in a session or a group is a kind of alchemy, where it's as if something from somebody is transmuted through me. And that's not, I mean, there's that I wasn't taught in that formal way to do. And there's also energy. And exactly as you take that breath right now, I can feel the heat in my hands. And that's not something I've been taught. It just flows in certain situations and is, as I've come to understand it, a healing energy.
mm. And so, did it take you time to sort of? I'm wondering whether, at times in the earlier days, whether when this exchange happened with clients, where you were being called on to kind of metabolize and transmute and alchemize the energy between you, did that ever overwhelm you or destabilize you, or tend to come into you and kind of fill you up? Did you ever go through those experiences with it?
As it happens, I don't think so. I can think of a few, you know, just like one situation comes to mind that was not to do with energy, but to do with the client's behavior, and that was a long time ago. But on the whole, no, that hasn't been my experience. There's something about the container of a session, the agreed space and time, and the exchange. I don't know, but that
But
actually.
outside client work, I'm thinking like life. Life isn't.
Oh, life. Oh
Yeah,
my God.
like partners and relationships with children and parents and friends. How has all that evolved with this space? Because this is the nitty gritty that the people watching will be struggling with these challenges, and we don't, it's very different in a session where there's that defined space, which is beautiful, but in the everyday challenges of life, I'm curious to know how that's showed up, how you've dealt with it, and what challenges there have been, and how you've come through that and integrated it.
Gosh, well, I think that I, as a child, felt so exposed and open and raw that probably practically any question felt like an intrusion.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think, I mean, they probably found me mysteriously keeping myself to myself, perhaps. So I experienced myself as opening and closing, opening and closing, and opening and closing many times a day, this kind of movement. And I've had to learn to honor that movement. Certainly in relationships, I've had to learn when I need to take myself separate in order to be able to fully be with somebody when I'm with somebody. So I go back to my earlier metaphor of that artwork. It's like, there's all this intricacy.
How has that impacted your partners, this needing to be separate? How has that affected your relationships?
Well, I think when I was younger, I probably didn't know how to talk about myself or what I needed in a way that they could necessarily easily understand. Oh gosh,
And have you needed to
had difficult
disentangle?
times for
Yeah,
sure.
have you needed to disentangle your own woundedness from that needing to separate? So was there like ancestral and personal narrative and sort of compaction around that need to separate? There was that pain of being in that dynamic and then needing to come separate to find yourself again. Was that a messy process?
Yes, is the short answer. And
Yeah.
your question reminds me of how so often I would be overwhelmed, somebody else would be feeling, let's say, anxious, and I would experience, pain in my heart or pain in my chest or palpitations, and I didn't know what it was, so that I had to find my way to have a rigorous separation process. And other things your question reminds me of I remember extraordinary things happening, it's a silly thing, it's a tiny detail, but I remember once a glass saucepan lid shattered just before a partner was about to arrive, which was clear to me was energy, the pitch of the energy. So there were many messy times, and many times that I'm sure that I didn't handle myself as elegantly.
I think it's fascinating because there's a thread here about being this empath, that I would label this as an empath, an embodied empath, that many people are working through these sensitivities that you've described. And, one label for that is an empath. And mediumistic empath would be another label. But these are just labels, but it's the challenges that I think are really useful for those watching, to hear how you've overcome those and how you've become strong through that, so that now you can have this place of largely impeccability to hold that this place, not only in your client sessions but through your life, so that it's strong and stable, because this is part of what you bring.
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I had an idea of an answer. 1 second. Can you ask me the beginning part of it again? Just because then again, it broke.
The empaths are like being an empath is like a label that we could associate with the sort of challenges and sensitivities that you were experiencing, and then and how you've evolved in that journey, so that place has become strong. It's become your power, rather than the way that is torturous to be in relationship, the way that is overwhelming to be in life. And it's become,
Right, okay, so now I know how to...
Yeah.
So I think it's a mixture of things that I don't know. I've always had this very strong sense inside, right? So even when I was feeling weak and victimized and confused and overwhelmed, inside of me was a sense of something that was huge, right? And that has been my mainstay, my guide. That's what I've stayed true to.
Yeah.
I've also been lucky enough that I was able to afford to go and have sessions, and I was lucky enough and discerning enough to find good practitioners and good teachers, and I also found bad ones and ones that went rotten. So I've also taken wrong turnings on the journey.
Brilliant. It's exactly what I was looking for, that shaping process.
And I also think there's an element of grace in it, because I don't know how to answer your question exactly. It's not, I can't say I did, right?
No, because it's not linear, is it? It's the wonder, it's the miracle. It's learning to appreciate.
But I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah.
How I find myself today is amazing, and I am so grateful for finally being able to put into form all this that I've known inside. So it's with a lot of gratitude that I have been able to survive what has been intensely not easy time.
Yes. I can imagine with that level of sensitivity and then reflective, like, so you said, I'd separate from someone to kind of get into my own sense of individuation, and then I'd feel their anxiety.
Across, and I'm still like that. I can feel it across miles, and I have to work with it and be precise and yeah, I'm making a little gesture with my finger of moving, which you probably can't see, but it's like to really discriminate, to really to be with those sensations and to attend to them.
And it really is in those fine margins where the subtleties of discernment, I would imagine, need to be very carefully worked with. It must get finer and finer, the discernment, in as you get more and more present to.
What I find very touching in this moment is that that way of life, I don't think I've told anybody before, actually, and it's just the way that I am on the inside, and I don't think about how much work, in a way, or attention is required in that time when ostensibly I'm washing up the dishes or watching the television or tidying up at home. So it's yeah. Yeah, it's just the way that I am. But so when I hear myself say it, it sounds like what a lot of ongoing work it is. I mean, I used to describe it as my life's journey in a way. I used to describe it as I've had my nose up against the grindstone, meaning I've been ferocious in my commitment to out this potential. And it's not as if I wasn't of service 10 years ago and 20 years ago, because work that I did with people then was well received and useful, but I guess from where I am now, it is again different.
So it's like refining your craft, and your craft has evolved, and each stepping stone has had its validity and use for both you and those that have received it on the way.
Yeah, and my craft is also my being, because
well, I can really relate to that, because when I trained as a Gestalt psychotherapist many, many years ago, the craft was in the skill of the beingness and mapping out these inner places, and encouraging clients to map them out within themselves and to map out the in-between between us. And that was, in essence, a lot of the work.
Yes.
So one question that's still sitting with me and keeps coming back is, how do you arrive at your no? I'm curious, as an empath, I'm labeling you as an empath, but with this connection to the mystery, what does a no feel like inside? Does it have do they have particular textures? You mentioned about that shattering of something before a partner came, and that you said there was a difference in pitch between your energies. Is that because you were not listening to your no, or were not aware of your no, and you have a much more refined sense of no now? Or does it sometimes take like something to shatter before you know that that's a no?
Wow. So the saucepan lid example, I was about to deliver a no. Again, it's a question of attunement, of becoming increasingly attuned, and discriminating and taking action on myself. So I think, again, in the past, I was probably a lot slower, didn't know, I was much clumsier in how to do a no. Both probably erring on being too floppy and at times probably too rushed and sharp, fast and explosive, I have no doubt. But these days it's simple, or mostly simple, I should say, and it's also, I mean, I'm also remembering other things of, following, again, years ago, knowing the right way to go, going left and going right, and then, I'm thinking of all sorts of situations of of synchronicity, and I don't quite know how that connects in with the question that you're asking me. But
well, I think when you know you'll know, my understanding is it creates so much freedom to be in the flow and to really be present to the synchronicity and to your yeses. But the no for me is part of the container.
But these days, again, it's not even necessarily mental. My body will go somewhere or it won't go somewhere.
Right.
I mean, it's again this constant listening
yeah, that's what I meant.
To what is arising.
And I think that
but
is that's only ever available in the present moment. It's never a concept. That's the beauty of embodied presence, is that it's constantly evolving. It's constantly about breathing and checking in and noticing. It's not about having preconceived ideals or judgments about what a no is.
No, but most people, it seems to me, most people begin their spiritual journey with ideas. They may find a book or hear a talk and they get excited or are touched or have a strong feeling about that. So for most people, that is often where it begins, and it's not appropriate in a way to dishonour that, because there's a lot of energy and motivation in there for people. Or of course they can break open. But yes, I mean, and I used to drive partners mad as well in the past. My so being in the moment, I can tell you, where when they may have wanted to make a plan. But yes, I mean, but to make a concept out of the present moment makes it a concept and takes one away from the immediacy of the being, of the feeling, of the ising, of the nowing.
Yeah. I think from my point of view, as I'm coming towards the end of this interview series, what's become apparent through each interviewee is the immediacy of presence around the awakening process that every sort of interviewee has been through, in which they are more available to make moment-to-moment decisions rather than these structured kind of rule books, manuals on how to be. I think that was the point that I was sort of alluding to, is that it just seems to be a common theme amongst those that I've interviewed, that they found those guidelines useful, but and then they came to a point where even that needed to go.
I think that there's something to do with containment, and when one has sufficient ballast inside, one can hold or be with, is perhaps a better word, all of that information that's present, right? And when one doesn't have that navigating on the inside, then I guess one needs to create containers from ideas and plans and so on and so forth. And as a useful way of functioning in the world, like we need to move forward. We're meant to move forward. We're not meant to sit.
I think there is a place. There is a place, because if you need to launch a website, write a book, launch, do things in the world, go shopping, make a list. There are uses of the mind and the way that the mind can organize information and create structures from information. But when we are led by that, when that is what we go to for our lens of being, our state of being, I think that's the sort of the refinement that I'm talking about, is coming back to this present moment felt experience and connection with the wonder as the primary way of being.
I think it's difficult to come with a one solution for all, because where everybody is and the way everybody needs to navigate for themselves is different. So it's almost as if everybody's coming from different directions and with different ways to find their way to this balance of material and spiritual. And we need both. Like sometimes in the spiritual world, we elevate, oh, everything spiritual is wonderful and everything material is no good. But I don't think it's like that. I think we absolutely need the material. We live in these wonderful bodies on earth. We need, life takes place here, and so it's something about honoring and the correct proportion of both.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I couldn't agree anymore. It's totally essential to be. I'm not saying not to be physical, not to be in the body, not to be in the material. It's so important. But when that governs us, when that dominates our sense of fulfillment, I think that's the trap not to fall into that, where it becomes our reference of self, the structures on the outside. That's the place that is the tipping point where we've lost that connection to our truth, our knowingness. That's the key.
Yes, the world is lost and we're confused, and I think it's not like everybody is always doing their best. So we also don't want to say that somebody's got it wrong, because where they are is where they are for whatever reasons their soul needs, where they choose to go next, where their evolution takes them. And also, fluidity as well as planning, every opposite, all the opposites are required. I don't think that there's any.
That's part of why we're here, is to experience those opposites. It's like you say, that is part of the human experience. We're here to explore what is possible.
Well, it's the balance of being truly human in a way, is to be able to include and to live and to enjoy.
Absolutely, yeah. Beautiful. So as we've come to the end of time, is there any last notes or points you wish to make?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm delighted to have been able to do this with you. I'm excited to be writing a book in which I'm putting some of this, and I'm great life, despite its at times difficulty. There is tremendous richness, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
And I look forward to continuing to be of use in the world.
I shall look forward to your book, and it's been a true honour to spend this time with you. Thank you very much for sharing yourself so openly today.
Thank you, David.